Somewhere in your life, there is a person everyone has quietly written off as too sensitive. Maybe it's you. They cry at things other people barely notice. A song, a stranger's kindness, a look on someone's face that lasted half a second too long. And for years, people have told them the same thing: toughen up. Stop overreacting. You feel too much. Here is what nobody ever told them. That same nervous system, the one everyone keeps apologizing for, is the most accurate threat detection system the human brain can produce. It is the reason they know someone is lying 3 sentences before the lie is finished. It is the reason they feel a room shift before anyone else even notices the air change. And it is exactly why manipulators either avoid them completely or specifically hunt for them first. Today, Mind Authority breaks down the real psychology behind people who feel everything, why it has nothing to do with weakness, why it terrifies the wrong kind of people, and why almost nobody who has this trait has ever been taught how powerful it actually is. Stay until the end, because the last 5 minutes of this video are the part that changes everything. Somewhere in your childhood, you learned a rule. Maybe nobody said it directly, but you absorbed it anyway. Stay composed. Keep it together. Don't let them see you cry. You scraped your knee, or someone said something cruel on a playground, or you simply felt something too large to hold quietly, and the adults around you responded the same way almost every time. Stop. Be strong. Don't. That message did not fade. It got wired in. Boys hear it loudest. Boys don't cry, but the lesson reaches everyone. Visible emotion is a liability. Tears, specifically, are something to manage, hide, or apologize for. Here is the part nobody tells you. That rule was built by people who did not understand what they were asking certain nervous systems to suppress. Because for some people, that suppression was not difficult. For others, it was nearly impossible. And the ones who could not suppress it were not failing at composure. They were running a completely different operating system. And what that system actually does has almost nothing to do with what we were taught to believe about it. In the 1990s, a psychologist, Dr. Elaine Aron, coined a term, the highly sensitive person. Not a diagnosis, not a disorder, a measurable, documented difference in how certain nervous systems process sensory and emotional information. Research estimates this applies to roughly 15 to 20% of the population. Here is what is actually happening inside their brains. For the average person, a sad song or a stranger's pain registers, gets processed, and fades. For a highly sensitive nervous system, that same signal hits harder, lingers longer, and processes more completely. Neuroimaging research has shown something specific. Highly sensitive individuals show stronger activation in brain regions linked to awareness, empathy, and emotional processing, particularly the insula and the mirror neuron system. The insula is the part of your brain responsible for detecting internal and external signals. It is, in a very real sense, part of your threat detection architecture. This is not a broken system. It is a more responsive one, which means the tears are not the malfunction. The tears are the exhaust from a system that is processing more raw data than everyone else in the room. And raw data, processed correctly, is intelligence. Let me ask you something honestly. Have you ever walked into a room and felt that something was wrong before a single word confirmed it? Have you ever noticed a forced smile, the kind that does not quite reach the eyes, while everyone else in the conversation missed it completely? Have you ever sat across from someone who was lying and felt it in your chest before your mind had even built the argument for why? If any of that sounds familiar, you've spent your entire life being told this was oversensitivity. It was never that. It was data collection happening faster than your conscious mind could explain it. And in a few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly why that same trait makes you one of 2 things to a manipulator: either the easiest target in the room or the one person they go out of their way to avoid. Most people never learn which one they actually are. Now, I need to be honest about something most videos on this topic will not say. This trait is not automatically a strength. In its raw, unmanaged form, It is also the exact profile manipulators are trained to find. Here is why. Manipulators look for one specific thing: depth of reaction. Someone who feels things intensely, who absorbs the emotional state of others, who struggles to detach from a conversation even after it ends. That person, unmanaged, becomes incredibly easy to manipulate. Guilt lands harder on someone who feels guilt at full volume. Love bombing works fastest on someone whose empathy receptors are already wide open. Emotional blackmail is devastating against someone who absorbs other people's pain as if it were their own. This is the part nobody talks about. Highly sensitive people are not naturally immune to manipulation. They are naturally vulnerable to it, until they understand the second half of what their nervous system is actually doing. Because the same system that makes them absorb a manipulator's pain also gives them the most accurate read of that manipulator's character that anyone in the room will ever get. The vulnerability and the power come from the exact same wiring. The only difference is whether you have learned to use it or whether it is currently using you. What I am about to describe has a name. I call it the signal reader. It is the specific mode a highly sensitive nervous system enters when it stops absorbing emotion passively and starts reading it actively. Here is the mechanical difference. A person without this trait reads words. They listen to what is said and respond to the content. A signal reader reads underneath the words, the slight tension in a voice that does not match the calm sentence being said, the micropause before someone answers a question they did not expect, the exact moment a room's energy shifts before anyone has said anything different. This is not mysticism, this is processing speed. Their brain is running a parallel analysis: tone, microexpression, inconsistency, emotional residue, while everyone else is only running the surface conversation. And here is what most people never realize about manipulators specifically. Manipulators rely on the very specific gap, the gap between what they are performing and what they actually feel. Most people cannot detect that gap. They take the performance at face value. A signal reader detects the gap almost immediately, not because they are paranoid, because their nervous system is built to notice when the emotional frequency of a room does not match the words filling it. This is why some highly sensitive people describe an instant, unexplainable discomfort around certain charming people long before that person does anything wrong. They are not imagining it. They are reading a frequency mismatch that the rest of the room has not picked up yet. Let me walk you through what this actually looks like. A manipulator meets two types of people in the same week. The first type processes emotion quickly and moves on. They hear a flattering compliment, feel good, and continue their day. The manipulator escalates slowly, layer by layer, because this person's emotional radar does not register anything is wrong until the pattern is already established. The second type is a signal reader who has done the internal work. The manipulator delivers the same opening line: warm, charming, generous. And something in the signal reader's chest tightens slightly. Not fear, recognition. The words say one thing, the frequency underneath says another. They cannot always name what is wrong yet, but they feel the mismatch immediately, the same way you would feel a single wrong note in an otherwise perfect piece of music. Most people would dismiss that feeling as random anxiety. A signal reader who understands their own wiring does something different. They do not ignore the signal. They do not override it to be polite. They simply slow down. They watch a little longer before they trust a little more. And manipulators feel this happening. They cannot always identify why a signal reader resists their usual approach. They simply notice that their tactics, which work almost everywhere else, are not landing the way they expect. So they do one of two things. They escalate the charm, testing for the crack they assume must be there, or they quietly move on to someone whose radar is turned off. Either way, something remarkable happens. The signal reader was never cold, never paranoid, never combative. They simply trusted a piece of information most people are taught to ignore. Now, here is the part that makes this trait complicated rather than simply admirable. This level of processing comes at a real cost. Most people feel an emotion, process it, and let it go within hours. A signal reader often does not get that luxury. They replay conversations. They lie awake reconstructing the exact look on someone's face. They feel a version of an old emotion resurface years after the event that caused it. Psychologists call this emotional rumination, and in highly sensitive people, it is less a choice than a reflex. The common misconception is that they feel more than everyone else. That is not quite accurate. They feel for longer. The signal does not fade as quickly. The processing runs deeper, which is also exactly why they often understand a situation, a person, a pattern of behavior more completely than anyone who moved on faster. This is not a coincidence. Some of history's most perceptive thinkers, writers, and strategists describe themselves this way, not numb to the world, but fully exposed to it, and somehow able to turn that exposure into insight that people who processed faster never reached. The depth is the cost. The depth is also the advantage. You cannot have one without accepting the other. And the tears that come with it are not the system failing. Emotional tears carry a measurably different chemical composition than the tears that simply lubricate your eyes. Elevated stress hormones, including cortisol. Crying may be one of the only mechanisms the body has for physically releasing that chemical load. A pressure valve that releases regularly is safer than one that has been sealed shut for years. The person who cries when they need to is not falling apart. They are completing a cycle their nervous system requires in order to keep functioning at this level of perception. Now, I need to say something most videos like this will avoid. Not everyone who cries easily is reading the room accurately. Some people feel intensely, but have never learned to separate what they are sensing about someone else from what they are projecting from their own unresolved history. That is not a signal reader. That is an open wound mistaking its own pain for perception. The difference matters enormously. A signal reader has done enough internal work to know which feelings belong to the present moment and which ones are echoes from somewhere else. Someone who has not done that work will often misread situations just as confidently as they read them correctly, because intensity of feeling is not the same as accuracy of feeling. So here is the honest question worth sitting with. When something feels wrong about a person or a room, are you reading new information or are you replaying old information that has nothing to do with what is actually happening in front of you? That distinction is the entire difference between a nervous system that protects you and one that quietly sabotages you while feeling completely convinced it is doing the opposite. Knowing which one is operating in any given moment is not natural. It is built, slowly, deliberately, through self-awareness most people never develop. For most of your life, you may have been told that feeling things this deeply was something to apologize for, that the tears, the absorption, the inability to simply let things go, that all of it needed fixing. Here's what I want you to actually walk away with. That system was never broken. It was built to notice what other people are trained to miss. It was built to feel the gap between a performance and the truth underneath it, long before most people even know there is a gap to find. The cost is real. The exhaustion is real. Nobody is asking you to romanticize either of those things. But the same wiring that makes you cry at a stranger's pain is the wiring that makes certain people genuinely uncomfortable standing too close to you for too long because you see something in them that they were counting on nobody noticing. They taught you to apologize for the signal. Nobody ever taught you to read it. This is Mind Authority. Subscribe, because next week we go even deeper into the psychological systems most people have and almost nobody was ever taught to use.